With affordability being a top priority for many Americans and supply not being able to meet demand in the early stages of 2026, there is one alternative. That is an electric vehicle. Now, by going with an EV right now in 2026, you don't have to worry about the high gas prices. But also, even though we no longer have the federal tax credits, this vehicle is heavily incentivized, making it the same price as a Chevrolet Trax. Well, in today's video, we're going to take a look at what the Chevrolet Equinox LT EV has to offer us, why this just might be a great daily driver, and more importantly, it is not going to be your typical one-dimensional compact crossover either. It can also be fun. So in today's video, we're going to check out what this vehicle is giving us in terms of its exterior appearance, interior features, take it out for a quick test drive, and see why for an EV coming in below $30,000 after tax incentives and also dealer incentives, maybe taking a look at the Chevrolet Equinox LT might be a great decision. Now, before we get in this video, I want to give a huge shout and thank you to Copeland Chevrolet in Hudson, Massachusetts for letting come down here to check out the Chevrolet Equinox EV. Their link will be in the description below, so you can check out their extensive Chevrolet inventory. So as always, let's begin with that pricing. For the 2026 Chevrolet Equinox EV LT we're taking a look at today, you have a starting cost of right around $35,000. Now, our model does have front-wheel drive, so all-wheel drive will be a little extra here for this vehicle, and unlike a conventional crossover, all-wheel drive means a dual electric motor setup, better performance, but it does come at the expense of some range. So you might want to keep all of that in mind, especially when you take a look at the pricing too, because if you go with the all-wheel drive model, you're paying a bit more, and instead of paying potentially $25,000, you're looking at $32,000 to $34,000, even with the incentives tacked on. Now, bringing all of that up, how do you get down to $25,000 with this vehicle? Well, the manufacturer incentives come in at around $6,000. You have dealer incentives, and then on top of that, for the state of Massachusetts, you get a $3,500 tax credit if you keep this model for 36 months, making the idea of leasing this model instead of buying it a better choice, maybe a bit more optimal if you're not ready to go all in on being an EV owner and you don't want to deal with the depreciation that has become very well known here with the EV segments in the middle part of the 2020s. Now, despite the fact that it is wearing the Equinox badge, and as you can tell, you get the nice little blue emblem here for the E, this is hardly a crossover, because it does look more like a station wagon, similar to a Kia EV6. Even though we do have some cladding here for the rear bumper and the wheel wells, if you park this next to a Chevrolet Trax, it's really not much larger. You have a lower roof line, it's more car-like, and that might be an ideal setup here for someone looking for an EV in this class and its price range. Now, taking a look at the design of this model, at least the top portion of the front fascia looks very Blazer-like, right? Thinner lights for the LED daytime running lights and main headlights. Also functional side air curtains for better airflow and helping out with the aerodynamics of this model. Also, functional vents right here. Really nice to see that. But a clean and minimal design up front. Also think it looks a bit more upscale than the Chevrolet Bolt. Now, as you make your way over to the side profile, here we have that cladding once again, but probably more importantly is that for the LT, you get 19-inch alloy wheels wrapped in Michelins. This is going to help out with the ride quality and improving the interior insulation. You're going to be very surprised here when it comes to how quiet this model really is. Obviously, since there is no engine under the hood, this is going to be one of those crossovers and vehicles that'll be suitable if you want a quiet and dimmed down experience when you are going to work or dropping the kids off at school. You're going to have body color matched side mirror caps, but no turn signal indicators, surprisingly, and you are going to have blind spot detection for added safety. Then making our way around to the back here, just like we saw up front with the Blazer-like front fascia, that styling does make its way to the rear fascia as well with the aggressive C-pillars, giving you somewhat of a Sportback-like appearance. And even with the roofline too, it slopes a bit. So you have a sportier design to this model. Obviously, with this being an EV, you're going to have the light bar that runs the length of the rear fascia, making this crossover look very sleek, and this too will be LED. Then for the lower portion of the rear bumper, here we have cladding once again. But even though you are going to have some ground clearance, I would not recommend taking this model off-road. Obviously, with the battery placement, you can have a lower center of gravity here, and we'll talk about that during the test drive. Taking a quick peek under the hood for the Chevrolet Equinox EV, unfortunately, we don't have a frunk, so not as practical as some rivals in this class. However, even though it does look like a conventional model, it is anything but conventional when it comes to its performance. So by going with the front-wheel drive model, you're looking at right around 220 horsepower and 243 pound-feet of torque and a range of around 317 miles. If you were to go with all-wheel drive, now you're looking at over 300 horsepower and right around 355 pound-feet of torque and a range of 309 miles. So not that big of a difference, but if you're someone just looking for an affordable daily driver, you got that here with the front-wheel drive model. Also, the range is impeccable. To get over 300 miles of range in any EV right now is pretty good. Also, it helps out with the practicality and daily usability for this crossover. Also, another thing too to keep in mind here is that some people are going to say, oh, only 220 horsepower, only 243 pound-feet of torque. That blows away the internal combustion version of the Chevrolet Equinox. And for a lot of crossovers at around $30,000, they're going to have underpowered, naturally aspirated four-cylinder engines. So these are all things you got to think about here. If you're someone who is set up to have an EV in your driveway, you can charge at home. This is going to be a more enjoyable, more engaging choice than going with, say, a Chevrolet Equinox with a gas motor or even a Chevrolet Trax at $25,000 when you factor in the incentives. So you have the performance, you have the fun, you also have the range, but what about the interior? Hopping inside the Chevrolet Equinox LT for the EV, you're greeted by manually adjustable cloth seats for both the driver and passenger. And I know what you're saying, I know what you're thinking here. Manually adjustable cloth seats at $35,000? You gotta be kidding me. I could get a well-equipped Equinox, a gas-powered Equinox, that gives me all the creature comforts and amenities, and you wouldn't be wrong there. Now you got to remember too, with EVs, they are more expensive than their gas-powered equivalents, and the incentives is what makes them enticing and appealing. Now if you are seriously looking at buying this model, there is one package available that provides a lot of value here at around $1,500. We'll go over that in a minute after we check out what this model has to offer us on the lower end. With these seats, they're comfortable, they're plush, they're supportive, and also the bolstering is pretty good. It fits the nature of this EV because the Equinox EV does drive like a sedan. It drives like a car, and you see that with the A-pillars as well. So if you're someone who's not ready to go in the crossover direction, you don't need a large vehicle, this is going to fit the bill in my opinion. Now also, of course, with this being an LT, you're not going to have all the fit and finish and the soft touch materials on the dashboard, on the door panels, on the center console. It most certainly feels like a $30,000 crossover, I'm going to be brutally honest here, because you don't have a leather-wrapped steering wheel either, and these are things that you could find out of a gas-powered equivalent at 35 grand. However, though, you're still going to have the same technology, which is great to see. A full digital gauge cluster, nice large infotainment system, physical buttons on the dashboard. It looks and feels conventional. Same setup as what you're going to find out of a Trailblazer, out of a Trax, out of an Equinox. So you're still going to have that modern experience, but it's not going to be foreign to you if you are hopping out of a gas-powered Chevrolet product right now. On the steering wheel will be a button that helps control that digital gauge cluster in front of you, and there will be a number of different layouts here. One layout that I do like is the navigation map, so that way you'll be able to just focus on the road ahead of you rather than looking at the infotainment system and taking your eyes off the road. But very simple, very straightforward. It's not very customizable, and some people might be looking for that. They don't want to have an in-depth digital gauge cluster, and I fully understand that. So this is going to be very similar to what we have experienced out of the gas-powered lineup. Taking a look at the infotainment system here. Similar software, similar technology. You can have all your widgets in place for your vehicle status, drive mode selector, your Google Assistant, Google Play Store, charging, camera. It is all right here. With this having Android-based software, you have Google Assistant, Google Play Store, and Google Maps also. Even though you do have some buttons for your climate control, below the infotainment system, you're going to have a climate menu here as well. So that way you can easily access your fan speed, also of course your fan direction, and then the temperature as well. One of the bigger differences though is that on the left side of the screen will be some icons here for your one pedal drive, also for your exterior lighting system. And lastly, you'll have your off button here for this EV. At the top of the screen will be more icons for your home screen, then more of a minimal layout here for your Google Maps, but then also you can display some information here such as your audio, your trip information, etc. Also, you're going to have your controls and safety for your dome light, your power window lockout, camera, traction control, your auto high beam assist, your park assist, rear automatic braking. Next, that will be your radio, then of course your onboard navigation, and then lastly will be your smartphone connectivity via Bluetooth. Now, when you do place this vehicle in reverse, you have a nice rear backup camera with trajectory. What I also like too is that the resolution and quality is pretty good here. So tech-wise, it's very straightforward, and it's not going to create any issues or learning curves in my opinion. You're going to find yourself right at home being behind the wheel of the Equinox EV. Continuing on beneath the head unit, here we have those dials and buttons we've been alluding to today with your climate controls, also your fan speed, and then you will have your heat and then your max AC for the front and rear defrosters. So again, you're going to have somewhat of a tactile experience here out of this EV. Beneath that, you're going to find a tray for a couple smartphones, a wallet, or other smaller tech gadgets. For the center console itself, 2 cup holders here to go along with 2 USB-C inputs. Then for the center storage compartment, enough room for some smaller items, maybe a small water bottle or 2, obviously smartphones, wallets, etc. Above is not going to be a panoramic moonroof. You're going to have to pay a little extra for that. So just keep all of this in mind here, that when you're spending at around $35,000 or $25,000 with the incentives, you are getting somewhat of a bare bones experience here out of the Equinox EV. However, this leads me to that optional package. So for $1,455 for the comfort package, this is where it gets good. This is where the LT might actually be a great choice for a lot of you. You get a heated steering wheel, but it gets even better. You have heated front seats for both the driver and passenger, and the driver's side gets 8-way power adjustability and 2-way power lumbar support. So for $1,500, you get a bit more value, a bit more creature comforts, and in some ways, it makes this EV feel a bit more grand and upscale at its price point of around $36,000 to $37,000 before those incentives. Now for passengers in the second row, they're going to receive right around 38 inches of legroom, which is very respectable here. In fact, that's not too far off some compact crossovers. It is about 2 inches less than a gas-powered Chevrolet Equinox, but you're not missing out on much here. In fact, you can have smaller kids sit back here on a daily basis or have average-sized adults sit back here relatively comfortably, and you can try squeezing in a third person in the center, making this vehicle even more versatile. The only downside, though, is the lower roofline. So the lower roofline makes this crossover look sleek, makes it look sporty, but it comes at the expense of headroom. So taller passengers might be hitting their head on the headliner. Now, you are going to have 2 center mounted air vents, which is really nice here, giving you better airflow during those summer or winter months. And you have 2 USB-C inputs here to charge up your smartphones. Love to see it. And best of all here, with the LT, you are going to receive a center armrest with 2 cup holders. I personally would argue that the Chevrolet Equinox EV isn't a traditional crossover. Cargo space would say otherwise. Now, unfortunately, with the LT, you're not going to receive a power liftgate standard, so you might want to keep that in mind if you are taking a look at this model. But inside, behind the second row seats, you're looking at right on 26.5 cubic feet of room, which would be very similar to some subcompacts and compact crossovers. So you're not missing out on much here when it comes to the cargo space. You'll be able to store 8, 9, 10 bags of luggage if you are going on a road trip with the family. On both sides of the cargo area will be some cubbies for some smaller items, maybe a couple water bottles, car detail equipment, or maybe even a first aid kit. Then when you lower the second row seats, that's where you're looking at right around 57 cubic feet, similar to, say, a Chevrolet Trax. So it's not going to be the largest EV at around $30,000, but it has enough space where it is usable for daily driving. And obviously, if you are going on a longer road trip, you can store everything back here. So it does have that utility you're looking for. And obviously, again, with that range, this is a very well-rounded crossover that maybe you wouldn't say the same for the gas-powered version. Every time you bring up electric vehicles in 2026, the conversation eventually leads back to, what about the federal tax credits that's no longer offered? What about the lack of infrastructure? What about the depreciation, which hits very, very hard after 2 years of ownership? These are all valid concerns. These are all valid issues. If you're one of those individuals that's looking at leasing an EV, you can charge at home, you're not worrying about the depreciation, all you're looking for is a vehicle that does replace your gas-powered model, the Chevrolet Equinox EV right now, thanks to the incentives, might be your best choice. Because at $26,000, you are getting a lot of vehicle for the price. Now, comparing this to its gas-powered equivalent, what are you missing out on? Not much, really. You have the cargo space, you have the interior space for the second row, same technology, and honestly, I think you're paying less because of the incentives. Now, okay, you don't have the ground clearance, and being behind the wheel of this model, you sit lower to the ground. It feels like you're driving a sedan. It really, truly does. So you're not going to be able to go off-road like you would with a Chevrolet Equinox Active. However, if you sacrifice the off-road capability, what you receive in return is performance. The power is very linear. You don't necessarily get thrown back in your seat. So that's why some people might want to go with the all-wheel drive version for 300 horsepower, 355 pound-feet of torque. But for me, it's the handling. I love the handling of EVs because I feel like I'm driving a Volkswagen GTI every single time I drive an EV. The lower center of gravity, the stiffer handling, and the suspension feels tighter. Now, okay, some people might not like that. But when you're on a winding back road, when you're driving to and from work, you're going to feel engaged. You're going to really enjoy your time behind the wheel. Also, because you don't have a gas motor under the hood, it's quiet. The interior insulation is pretty good here. Even with the 19-inch alloy wheels, you don't get a lot of road noise. Now, to receive any of this out of a gas-powered crossover, you're spending $40,000 to $45,000 easily. And if you want performance, you're probably spending $55,000. So if performance is what you want, EVs kind of is the way to go. But also, if you're someone who wants the range, you got that here, whether you go front-wheel drive or all-wheel drive, over 300 miles of range, which is great. You also have a vehicle that is going to be practical for you and your family. And it comes back to the affordability. Now, truth be told, all EVs drive the same. So I could sit here, I could try driving around for 40 minutes and tell you what's different compared to an EV6, or how is it different compared to a Tesla Model Y or Model 3. And honestly, I think performance is going to be the only difference here when you're looking at a front-wheel drive version. But really, though, it's all the same. So it just comes down to what you're looking for, what you like, and the intangibles, right? The practicality, the range, that's going to be the deal maker or deal breaker. And for $26,000, thanks to the incentives and up here in Massachusetts, this is almost a no-brainer. And if you're someone looking for a daily driver, you don't travel a lot, I think this is pound for pound better than the gas-powered Equinox. Because you don't get the CVT, you don't get the 1.5-liter turbo with a front-wheel drive version. So there's no droning, it's quiet, it's comfortable, it's relaxing. And sure, you don't have leather trimmed seats, you don't have a leather-wrapped steering wheel, but there is a sense of refinement. And with all that being said, the Chevrolet Equinox EV, in my mind, actually, right now in 2026, seems to be like a no-brainer. It seems to be a great deal right now. Now, okay, you don't want to buy it, that's fine, because we have no idea what the depreciation is going to be like. But for $26,000, or even for a lease offer at around, I think, $350,000, it's kind of hard to give that up. So all in all, after spending some time today with the Chevrolet Equinox EV, it's hard to pass up on this thing. It really is. The pricing alone is what makes this crossover appealing. And again, it comes down to the individual too, because if you can charge at home, that's a game changer. If you can't, it becomes a headache. And if you're someone who is just ready to make that leap, to me, at this particular price point, it makes more sense than a Chevrolet Trax or Chevrolet Equinox with a gas-powered engine. So if you're someone who is ready to make that jump, look no further than the LT for the Equinox EV. So guys, let me know what you think here about the 2026 Chevrolet Equinox EV. Is this a great buy right now, or would you look elsewhere? Let me know in the comment section below. But guys, once again, thanks so much for watching. Take care, and I'll see you guys next time.